From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.
Good day. Radio Pilipinas World Service can also be heard on shortwave broadcast through the shortwave facilities of the United States Agency for Global Media, or Voice of America, on the following shortwave frequencies: 12.020 MHz, 15.640 MHz, and 17.665 MHz. I'm your host, Leo Magpayo, and this is Dateline Malacañang in Review. Malacañang on Monday said Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. is keeping a close watch on the escalating conflict in the Middle East and has ordered government agencies to step up assistance for affected Filipinos. Presidential Communications Office, or PCO Undersecretary and Palace Press Officer Claire Castro told reporters that the president wants all concerned agencies to intensify monitoring efforts and ensure that help reaches Filipinos caught in the tension that began on February 28th. She added that the president reiterated his directive to the Department of Foreign Affairs, or DFA, the Department of Migrant Workers, or DMW, and other relevant agencies to stay on top of the situation and guarantee the safety of overseas Filipinos. Castro also assured that the government is ready to carry out repatriation once Middle East airspace reopens.
Sa unang putok pa lang ng gulo, malinaw na ang utos ng Pangulo nitong February 28. Ibigay ang lahat ng tulong ng pamahalaan sa ating mga kababayan na naiipit sa nangyayaring kaguluhan sa Middle East. Iginiit ni Pangulong Marcos Jr. sa mga ahensya na ipagpatuloy at paigtingin pa ang pagmomonitor sa kalagayan ng mga Pilipino sa mga apektadong lugar. Kahapon, March 1, ay nagbigay muli ng mensahe ang Pangulo at inulit ang utos sa DFA, DMW at iba pang ahensya na i-monitor ang sitwasyon at siguruhin na makakarating ang tulong ng pamahalaan para sa kaligtasan ng ating mga kababayan. Nananatiling handa ang mga sangay ng gobyerno sa posibleng repatriation ng ating mga kababayan sa oras na magbukas ang airspace ng Middle East. Iyan ang pangako at nais ni Pangulo Marcos Jr. Maaari namang tumawag ang ating mga kababayan sa OWA emergency hotline numbers upang idulog ang kanilang mga pangangailangan.
Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, or EDCA sites in the Philippines do not pose a threat to any country. The Department of National Defense, or DND, stressed Monday as officials moved to dispel fears linking the facilities to the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. In a press briefing at Malacañang, quoting a statement released by the National Security Council, or NSC, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said there are no American military bases in the Philippines, and the EDCA sites remain fully owned, controlled, and managed by the Armed Forces of the Philippines, or AFP. The NSC said EDCA sites are Philippine military facilities, not U.S. bases. These locations are jointly developed for training, humanitarian assistance and disaster response, and strengthening the country's defense posture. It added that no EDCA site is being used to launch attacks, and President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has been firm that the facilities will not be used for offensive operations. NSC said Iran's strikes targeted U.S. facilities in neighboring countries underscoring that the Philippines is not part of the conflict zone and faces no credible direct threat.
There are no American military bases in the Philippines. The sites referred to under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, or EDCA, are Philippine military bases that remain under the full ownership, control, and management of the armed forces of the Philippines. The National Security Council, in coordination with the Armed Forces of the Philippines, the Department of National Defense, and other concerned agencies, continues to closely monitor developments in the Middle East. At this time, tensions remain confined to the region and there is no verified direct threat to Philippine territory, including our military facilities. So we urge the public to remain calm, exercise discernment, and be vigilant against disinformation. At nagsalita na rin po at nagpahayag ang AFP at ang DND. At aking din pong babasahin ang ilan sa kanilang pahayag. Sa kasalukuyan, ang gulo ay nananatili lamang sa gitnang silangan at walang inaasahang direktang banta sa ating teritoryo, maging sa mga Pilipino at dayuhang nasa bansa. Hinihikayat namin ang publiko na maging mapagmatyag laban sa disinformasyon at kinukundina natin ang mga pagpapalaganap ng takot sa ganitong mga pagkakataon. Gayunpaman, nakahanda ang DND at ang AFP na tumugon sa mga posibleng kaganapan kabilang ang posibleng suporta sa paglikas at koordinasyon sa pagtugon sa krisis para sa mga Pilipino sa mga apektadong bansa kung kinakailangan bantayan or rather kung kinakailanganin batay sa sitwasyon. So yan po ang kanilang pahayag.
House Palace Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. on Tuesday reported over 1,400 Filipinos in the Middle East have requested repatriation as the conflict between Israel, the United States, and Iran intensifies. During a news briefing in Malacañang, President Marcos noted that the situation is very fluid, with airports closed, airspace restricted, and fighting operations expanding to new areas, complicating evacuation efforts. The president said that 586 Filipinos in Dubai, 297 in Israel, 270 in Abu Dhabi, 231 in Bahrain, 22 in Jordan, and 10 in Iran have sought to be repatriated to the Philippines. The president emphasized that evacuation by air is now not possible owing to airport closures and no-fly zones. President Marcos expressed concern about potential misidentification situations amid continuous missile and drone strikes. He also stated that land evacuation is risky since massive vehicle movements in active battle zones may be misconstrued for hostile objectives. President Marcos stated that Philippine Embassy, labor attachés, and defense attachés are in frequent communication with Filipino communities in impacted nations and they are working closely with host governments for guidance. The government is on constant alert with embassies and abroad posts operating hotlines for Filipinos and their families.
Kaya't very fluid ang situation. Kaya't patuloy namin monitor. We are in continuous contact, constant contact with our labor attaché, of course, our ambassadors, our labor attachés, and our defense attachés para malaman kung ano ba ang sitwasyon. Unang-una, meron na tayong mga request na for repatriation. Halo-halo ito. Meron dito yung talagang pauwi na, natapos na ang kanilang trabaho, natapos na ang kanilang kontrata, pauwi na dapat sila talaga. Yung basically, dahil nagsara lahat ng airport, walang lumilipad na aeroplano, na-stranded sila. At yung isang grupo naman ay yung mga tiga doon na gustong lumabas at umalis doon sa danger area. So as of early this morning, 10 ang gusto magpa-repatriate from Iran, Ang pinakamarami from Israel, 297, 22 from Jordan, 231 from Bahrain, 586 from Dubai, 270 from Abu Dhabi. Altogether, that's 1,416 Filipino nationals who would like to have requested repatriation. Ito ngayon ang problema. Ang problema, walang lumilipad na eroplano. At yung mga airport ay tinatamaan na. We have heard reports of attacks on different airports around the region. Ang assessment namin is delikado siguro magpalipad. Kahit na kaya nating magkumuha ng eroplano at ipasok, wala tayong magagawa. Dahil, number one, the airports are closed. There are all no-fly zones. This is a combat area. So right now, safety first for our people. Essentially, ang advice natin sa kanila, shelter in place and follow the host government's advice. Yun ang magiging pinakamahalagang impormasyon dito ay kung anong sabihin ng ating ng mga local authorities. Kaya mabuti naman dahil napakarami nating kababayan doon, marami tayong contact point sa mga gobyerno sa iba't ibang bansa kung saan nandoon ng may OFW na Pilipino.
That was Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Also on Tuesday, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. formally welcomed South Korean President Lee Jae-myung to Malacañang for a 2-day state visit aimed at strengthening cooperation in defense, maritime, security, and economic development. President Marcos and First Lady Liza Araneta Marcos received the South Korean leader and First Lady Kim Hae-kyung at the Kalayaan grounds, marking the first state visit by a South Korean president since the Philippines Free Trade Agreement took effect on December 31, 2024. Following arrival honors, President Lee signed the Palace Guestbook before proceeding to a bilateral meeting with President Marcos. With shifting regional and global security dynamics, the two leaders are expected to deepen coordination in key areas, including military modernization and marine security. The meeting gathered top Philippine officials, among them Trade Secretary Cristina Aldeguer Roque, Finance Secretary Frederick Go, Department of Economy, Planning and Development or DepDev Secretary Arsenio Balisacan, Interior Secretary John Vic Rimulya, Executive Secretary Ralph Recto, Education Secretary Sani Angara, Agriculture Secretary Francisco Chu Laurel Jr., National Security Advisor Eduardo Año, and Communications Secretary Dave Gomez. The talks come amid rising tensions in the Middle East, which could impact global oil markets and supply chains. After the bilateral discussions, both leaders will issue a joint press statement and witness the signing of new agreements. President Lee's visit coincides with the 77th anniversary of Philippine-Korean diplomatic relations established in March of 1949. In recent years, both nations have expanded cooperation in trade, infrastructure, energy, shipbuilding, and defense modernization. President Marcos and Lee last met during the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation or APEC Summit in Gyeongju in October 2025. Before arriving in Manila, Lee visited Singapore and paid tribute to Dr. Jose Rizal at Luneta Park.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. hailed the signing of a wide slate of cooperation agreements during the state visit of South Korean President Lee Jae-myung in Malacañang on Tuesday. Speaking at a joint press conference, President Marcos said the new Memoranda of Understanding, or MOU, will drive deeper collaboration between Manila and Seoul in defense, veterans affairs, agriculture, trade and investment, intellectual property, digital innovation, Korean language education, cultural exchange, and police cooperation, further strengthening the Philippines-Republic of Korea strategic partnership established in 2024. President Marcos and Lee witnessed the formal exchange of documents between Philippine officials and their Korean counterparts following the ceremony. Among the agreements signed were MOUs on digital cooperation between the DICT and Korea's Ministry of Science and Information and Communications Technology and innovation programs between the Department of Economy Planning and Development or DepDev and Korea's Foreign Ministry. Amendments to defense procurement arrangements, cooperation on veterans affairs, agricultural development, trade and economic cooperation, reinforced intellectual property collaboration, Korean language programs in Philippine schools, cultural cooperation, and enhanced coordination between the Philippine National Police and the Korean National Police Agency. The visit marks another milestone in the 77-year diplomatic relationship between the two nations, which continues to expand across trade, infrastructure, energy, shipbuilding, and defense modernization.
And as we have just witnessed, we concluded a number of agreements in the field of defense materials procurement, veterans affairs, agriculture, trade, investment and economic cooperation, intellectual property, digital cooperation, digitalization and innovation, Korean language training in schools, cultural cooperation, and police cooperation, which will sustain the momentum of the Philippines-Republic of Korea strategic partnership for the future.
That was Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. pledged Wednesday to push for policies that attract more investments and open new opportunities, as he lauded the signing of several business agreements in key strategic sectors between the Philippines and South Korea. Speaking at the Philippines-Korea Business Forum at Conrad, Manila in Pasay City, the Philippine President assured the South Korean business community of his administration's commitment to advancing government policies to strengthen investor confidence and promote inclusive economic growth for both countries. President Marcos welcomed the agreements between Philippine and South Korean firms aimed at enhancing collaboration in key industries, including shipbuilding, nuclear energy, aerospace, critical minerals, supply chain, retail, and health and wellness.
The business agreements signed earlier today on various industries, including shipbuilding, nuclear energy, aerospace, critical minerals and supply chain and retail, health and wellness demonstrate our enthusiasm for our private sector to deepen our strong economic relations. All of these will ripple into significant partnerships that will generate projects, investments, and, of course, livelihood. So to our partners from Korea, your investment in the Philippines reflects a strategic and forward-looking decision. This administration remains persistent in its commitment to meaningful reform. We are eradicating bureaucratic barriers, reducing the cost of doing business, and boosting our competitiveness in the global arena. Through the Create More Act, we are opening the door to bigger investments that bring real opportunities to our people. We are supporting qualified projects that invest at least 50 billion pesos or create at least 10,000 jobs. They mean more business rising up, more Filipinos employed, and more families given the chance for a better life.
You just heard Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Also on Wednesday, Malacañang said the country's economic managers will determine the possible rates of the proposed oil excise tax cut should Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. exercise his emergency powers amid tensions in the Middle East. Speaking to reporters, Communications Undersecretary and Palace Press Officer, Attorney Claire Castro said President Marcos would consult his economic team if he decides to reduce excise tax on petroleum products once Dubai crude exceeds $80 per barrel. Castro said President Marcos cannot suspend the imposition of mandatory excise taxes on all oil and fuel products unless Congress passes a new law. Under Republic Act or RA 10963 or the Tax Reform for Acceleration and Inclusion or TRAIN law, excise taxes on petroleum products were implemented in 3 tranches from January 1st, 2018 to January 1st, 2020. RA 10964 also provides for the automatic suspension of the excise tax increase if the average Dubai crude oil price reaches or exceeds $80 per barrel. Castro explained that the provision covered only the 2018 to 2020 period. She said President Marcos may certify as urgent a proposed measure seeking a new authority to reduce excise taxes, noting that it is timely. She also echoed President Marcos's assurance that the excise tax cut proposal would only be temporary. Amid tensions in the Middle East, President Marcos on Tuesday assured the public that the country has sufficient oil supply, with stockpiles ranging from 29 to 67.5 days depending on the product. President Marcos also expressed the government's readiness should Dubai crude range between $80 and $90 per barrel for 2 months.
Wala pong napag-usapan kung gaano kalaki, kung gaano kababa. Basta ang gusto lamang po niya sana ay magkaroon po siya ng power, pero temporary lamang po ito. At sa panahon po na ganito, na biglaan po may nangyayaring ganitong hidwaan, kinakailangan din po tayo makaagapay sa ating mga kababayan, lalo kung sobrang taas po ng presyo po ng krudo. Wala pong napag-usapan kahapon at makikinig naman din po siya sa mga economic team kung ano yung pinakamaganda po na reduction rate. Of course, mag-a-adjust din po. At sabi nga naman po ng Pangulo, ito'y temporary. Para lang po makaagapay tayo kung darating po talaga na sobrang mahihirapan po ang ating mga kababayan sa pagtaas po ng presyo ng krudo. Sa huli natin pong pakikipag-usap, ang sabi po sa atin kapag ka po nag-lift or nag-suspend po ng excise tax ay dapat po 2018 to 2020. So sa ngayon po ay hindi po siya umiiral, kaya po ninanais po ng Pangulo na magkaroon ng panibagong batas para po mabigyan siya ng authority na ma-reduce ang excise tax.
Palace Press Officer Attorney Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. on Thursday praised the early completion of the new footbridge and concourse at the Epifanio de los Santos Avenue or EDSA busway Kamuning Station, calling it a major boost for the more than 750,000 commuters who pass through EDSA every day. The President, together with First Lady Liza Araneta Marcos and Public Works Secretary Vince Dizon, inspected the newly built covered footbridge, which now provides direct and safer access to the Kamuning busway station. The structure replaces the steep and heavily criticized Mount Kamuning footbridge. The upgraded facility features elevators, wheelchair lifts, and a wider pedestrian walkway similar to the SM North Concourse, making it more accessible for seniors, persons with disabilities, and daily commuters. President Marcos confirmed that the old footbridge will be permanently closed. President Marcos also underscored the importance of proper maintenance to ensure the new facilities remain safe, clean, and convenient for the public. The Kamuning footbridge and station improvements form part of the ongoing modernization of the EDSA busway system, a flagship initiative of the Department of Transportation. The project, implemented in coordination with the Metropolitan Manila Development Authority and Department of Public Works and Highways, includes the rehabilitation of the Kamuning busway station and the construction of an integrated pedestrian access system designed to enhance safety, accessibility, and transfer efficiency along EDSA.
How did you manage the flight of stairs today?
Well, the old one is not very good at all. At saka, hindi mo ma-realize pag nandito ka sa baba, gumagalaw pala yan pagka may dumadaan. Kaya mas mabuti na ito. That's why the first time that we saw it, nung in-inspection namin yung MRT, ay sabi ko talagang hindi practical yung kanilang ginawa. Kaya ngayon ay may pinagbago, naayos natin ito within 4 months. Ang pangako sa atin ay 6 na buwan, 4 na buwan pa lang tapos na. Kaya ngayon, mas mababa na ang akyatin ng hagdan, tapos meron ng elevator para yung mga hindi kayang umakyat ng hagdan, meron pa tayong wheelchair lift na ginawa para sa yung mga naka-wheelchair. Pati wheelchair, they provided a wheelchair para mas magalang naman ang magiging commuting experience. Kaya so far, I'm happy to see that this is the sort of thing that ito naman ay kaya naman palang gawin. Hindi naman ganun kahirap at basta desidido tayo na ayusin natin ang commuter experience dahil ang dumadaan sa bus pa lang ay 750,000 ang pasahero kada.
MRT and bus.
So the MRT and bus, 750,000 ang gumagamit ng everyday. Mapagaang lang ng kaunti ang kanilang mahirap na nga mag-commute. Mahaba, mainit, kung ganun. Sabi ko dapat naman tugunan natin yung pang-araw-araw na dinadaanan ng ating mga kababayan para makapunta sa trabaho at para makauwi.
Was Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. on Friday reaffirmed his administration's commitment to strengthening micro, small, and medium enterprises, or MSMEs, along with expanding skills training programs to open more job opportunities for Filipinos. Speaking at the launch of the Trabaho at Negosyo initiative in Pasay City, the President said government efforts continue to evolve as industries rapidly shift due to digital technology and artificial intelligence. President Marcos noted that many skills learned even just a few years ago are now becoming outdated, emphasizing the need for continuous reskilling and upskilling. The President said his administration is expanding enterprise-based training programs to help employers prepare workers for industry needs. The chief executive stressed that the goal is not only to help Filipinos survive in a changing economy, but to thrive in it. President Marcos encouraged participants to maximize the opportunities offered by the Trabaho at Negosyo program, saying that building skills builds confidence and ultimately strengthens the nation.
Today, we live in a very uncertain world. What many of us have studied and developed a decade or even just a couple of years ago are sometimes we find no longer relevant. Industries are being reshaped by digital technology and artificial intelligence, or AI. Traditional jobs are transforming. The skills that were once optional, now they are essential. Naniniwala ako, kayang makasabay naman ang mga Pilipino. Alam naman natin na sa kabila ng mga hamon, maabilidad at madiskarte ang ating mga kababayan. Marunong tayong maghanap ng paraan. Hindi natin sinusukuan ang problema kahit na ang hinaharap natin. Hindi hadlang ang makabagong mundo sa ating pag-unlad. Bagkus, gagamitin natin ito upang magtagumpay pa sa buhay. Ang isang sari-sari store owner ay maaaring makapagpalawak ng negosyo sa pamamagitan ng itinatawag na e-commerce. Ang isang bagong graduate mula sa probinsya ay hindi na kailangan pang lumuwas sa Maynila upang magtrabaho, basta't may sapat na kasanayan at internet. We equip our people not only to survive, but to succeed in this changing world.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
And finally, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. is set to visit the United Nations headquarters in New York on March 10th, a trip Malacañang describes as crucial amid rising tensions in the Middle East. Officials say the UN remains the most appropriate venue for the president to call for peace in the region and to push for the protection of civilians, including Filipinos living and working in affected areas. In a palace briefing, Department of Foreign Affairs or DFA spokesperson Angelica Escalona said the president is expected to urge all parties to exercise restraint, uphold international law, and return to the negotiating table. During the visit, the Philippine president will address two major UN events: the 70th session of the Commission on the Status of Women or CSW70 and a special session of the United Nations General Assembly. At the CSW70, Escalona said, President Marcos will highlight the Philippines' commitment to advancing the rights and welfare of women and girls. At the General Assembly, the Philippine president will seek broader support for the country's bid to become a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council for 2027 to 2028. Escalona said the Philippines' long-standing advocacy for multilateralism, human rights, and humanitarian action makes the Security Council seat vital to national interest.
Mahalaga po ito dahil nagbibigay ito sa Pilipinas ng kapangyarihan at boses sa mga usaping global safety at security. Importante po ang mga usaping ito para sa mga Pilipino at mga mamamayan mula sa mga developing countries. May impact po ito sa ating sovereignty, maritime security, sa global economy at sa safety ng ating overseas Filipino workers. Responsibilidad natin na tumulong para maging mas mapayapa at patas ang mundo. Responsibilidad din nating protektahan ang interes ng ating bansa. Sa pagsali sa UN Security Council, ngayon pa lang ay magiging bahagi tayo ng solusyon para handa tayo sa kahit na anumang hamon na harapin natin sa hinaharap.
Was Department of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Angelica Escalona.
Dateline Malacañang.
Before we conclude our program, Radyo Pilipinas World Service of the Presidential Broadcast Service can be heard over the following shortwave frequencies: 12.020 MHz, 15.640 MHz, and 17.665 MHz. Radyo Pilipinas World Service is also live on audio streaming. Just download Evox PBS Receiver on your Google Play Store or the App Store from your Apple phone. You can also visit our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Just type in and search for Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Kindly subscribe, like, and share our posts as well. And that concludes this edition of Dateline Malacañang in Review. For Radyo Pilipinas World Service, this is Leo Magpayo. Good day and stay safe.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.